which might happen on occasion in companies. Or the employees look at the decision and go, you know what? That outcome that they want is undesirable. I'm not going to do it because I don't want that outcome. Or it's not even possible, so I'm not even going to try. So these unintended consequences arise from these strategic decisions. This too is not a business case, but it's instructive. The Great Plague, Black Plague, hit Europe in the 1300s. Decimated, one of the worst pandemics in human history. Historians believe a possible cause were fleas who lived on rats. And the rats were in Asia, but they were traveling with merchants along the Silk Road, major trade route, and they were getting to Europe. That's not the unintended. Trade is not bad. And it's not the unintended consequence of this decision. Go 100 years earlier, Pope Gregory IX, who ruled the Roman Catholic Church, is the first pope who put in writing what researchers can find, what's called a vox in Roma, that the black cat, in his words, the vessel of Satan. This became an immediate death warrant for the believers, for black, who wants Satan in their cottage? So black cats were exterminated. Go now 100 years later. Even go to the 1600s for the Great Plague of London. It allowed people to start to believe that cats were bad. And oh, by association, so must be dogs. So they thought dogs and cats were the cause of the plague. The Lord Mayor in London in the 1600s, on the advice of his physicians, passed a written rule saying all dogs and cats must be exterminated. Matter of fact, they hired exterminators who killed tens of thousands of dogs and cats. What's the unintended consequence of this?
Rats.
Rats and fleas. Both plagues were a lot worse because the rat population became uncontrolled. Today, you might know of people who, when they see a black cat, won't cross its path. Is that still valid? Does anybody know anybody who knows someone? Thank you.
Yeah.
Right? Hundreds of years later, it's still in our biased conscience for no real reason. Your employees expect you to be clairvoyant. I should be about 40-some minutes into an hour talk. If you'll let me spend the next 20 minutes, I'd like to give you 6 steps that you can use to avoid, reduce, or minimize and mitigate unintended consequences. If not, we can call the talk a day here, and I'll just leave you hanging, and you'll figure out how to deal with them on your own. You choose. Stop now, keep going. Keep going. Whenever if you're going to write your book, and you're going to come up with a prescription, let me advise you. Now, Angelo's the marketing wizard here, not me, but I've learned a lot from him over the years. If you're going to come up with a prescription, make it a memorable name. Make it a word. Don't have a bunch of things that when you put the first letter together of those things, you go, that makes no sense. First of all, it's easy for you to remember if it's a word. Secondly, it's easier for the marketplace. So we came up with Secure. It's a 6-step process. The first step is to slow down the decision. I know, we're all busy. We don't have time to slow down, but you need to. The first step, plan specific time to think about your company's future and your own career's future. There was a research study done that was published in the Harvard Business Review of 187 middle market companies, and they found that on average, the CEOs running these middle market companies spent less than 3 hours a month thinking about the strategic future of their company. Right? If you're not thinking about the strategic future of your company as the leader, nobody else is. You're left with working in the moment. You're dealing with urgent versus important, if you want to use Covey's. Right? You have to fight the fact that you make emotional decisions. These are very bad for your strategic planning. Emotion can lead you down the wrong path.
This is the test. This is the test. Pepsi versus Coke. The Pepsi Challenge. And all across America, more people take Pepsi time after time after time. Pepsi Coke.
Come on. Get your blood flowing.
It's the weekend. Come on.
Right? Okay, admittedly that was for a different time, but it was a powerful set of commercials. History lesson for those of us that weren't around or don't remember the Pepsi Challenge. On the off chance, has anybody heard from their older brothers or maybe their parents about the Pepsi challenge? Did you ever see it online in a YouTube commercial or something from days gone by? Yeah, well, it was very effective. This idea, this blind taste test where we would sample two things and guess what? People preferred Pepsi over Coke. Historically, since Coke started in the 1800s, they had a venerable brand, right? They were a secret recipe in the vault. Nobody knows it, people love it. This commercial and the idea of the Pepsi generation was pushing Coke into this idea that they were a product for a bygone era. They were your uncle's drink. Cool kids are drinking Pepsi because it's the challenge and we like it. Coincidentally, at the same time, they had this formula rolling around headquarters for a different flavor combination for Coke. New Coke. Thank you. I like you. You're traveling with me.
What a disaster.
So they decided to do their own taste tests. Not public in commercials, but just to see. And the researchers came back. Angelo might have been one of those researchers. Came back and said, hey boss, people like the new flavor over Pepsi. This is awesome. This is us now. And oh, by the way, unfortunately, they like it better than Coke too. Oh, well, so responding to the decrease in sales and the aggressiveness of Pepsi, they launched, as we heard earlier, New Coke. And they were just expecting to be able to take the market by storm. What they didn't understand or didn't expect, and the unintended consequences was, we hated it! People felt you took away something that I loved from me. Robert Goizetta, who was the CEO of Coke at the time, was known for making quick decisions. He decided very quickly that this was a fiasco for them. So they reverted back to their original flavor. Now, some might argue that this was a marketing act of genius, create scarcity, whatever. I don't know. The research we saw suggests it was an unintended consequence of an emotion-based decision. The second one is to expand your knowledge. Two ways to do this. Assess the information that's available for you and your company. You would be surprised how much people who are down at the street level or the first level know about the realities of how your business works. And if you don't bring in the people who are going to implement the decision in the strategy making, you run into a real risk. Matter of fact, our research shows it's a great way to avoid unintended consequences. That's people actually have to do the work if this makes sense. The second part is to access information outside your building. You don't have all the answers in your company. Talk to consultants who understand the situation because they've seen it before. I'm biased towards peer learning. Talk to other executives who have seen this in their business. Experience is the best teacher, but some lessons in business are best learned vicariously through the experiences of other executives. In 2015, Doug McMillon, who was then CEO of Walmart, and his executive team were sick and tired of having their name in every article about companies not paying a living wage. You remember those days?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And their entry-level employees weren't too happy at the pay that they were getting. So they decided that they would take those 500,000 employees and they would raise their pay. And Doug and the executive team thought, woohoo! It's going to be kumbaya. We won't be in those articles anymore. We'll get some good press for a change, and our population employees will be happy. So they rolled out this pay raise. The unintended consequence of that decision is the cohort right above the minimum wage people got pissed off. Why? Because I've been here 10 years, and that new hire is making the same amount of money that I'm making. What do they do? I'm going to get less overtime now. I may not get a bonus because they're paying these. They had 1.3 million employees, right? And they fixed the problem for 500,000, but not for the balance. The Economic Policy Institute, who does research for this, says normally what happens is when you raise the pay of your lowest raised people, you also raise the pay of the cohort right above them, so you don't have this problem. Walmart did not do that. Eventually they did, and they raised their pay and their salary by about $2.3 billion in aggregate from having made that decision. Big numbers, right? Clarify the desired outcome. Start with the end in mind. It's really important whenever you roll out a strategic decision and you ask your employees to change their behavior, that you tell them good behavior from bad behavior. Look, we want this outcome, but this is what we want to do, especially if you're talking to the sales organization. Because you want to make sure they're doing what you think they're doing in the marketplace. This example came to us from an executive at Burger King. When they had their drive-thru, they wanted to make sure that the drive-thru experience was similar to the in-store experience. So they used technology to solve the problem. They installed a sensor where you drove up and said, I'd like a Whopper. And they put another sensor where you paid your money for your Whopper and you got the fries and everything, and a timer. Their goal was 3 minutes. You should be able to get through that line in 3 minutes because that's what we see in the stores. And they were delighted at corporate headquarters and the regional managers because they were getting now reports from their systems that were saying, holy hell, we're meeting or beating 3 minutes. Even during the peak times of the day, breakfast and lunch. This is awesome. I don't know if any of you have gone through a drive-thru, in the early days especially. You would drive up. I like my Whopper, no cheese, Diet Coke, whatever. You drive up, here's my money. The teller would say, okay, thank you. Oh, by the way, your Whopper's not ready yet. Would you drive around into the parking lot?
We'll bring it out to you.
We'll find you. We'll find you. So even though the executives were thinking, and you drive off, you didn't have your food. Yeah, you got out of there in less than 3 minutes, but you had to wait in the parking lot for how long?
Yeah.
Right? Make sure you clarify the behaviors that you're looking at. Okay, we got 3 more, ladies and gentlemen. Unify the team. This is an easy one. Never be, write this down. Never be a micromanager. It is the #1 way to kill employee engagement and to drive people out of your company. The second one is to effectively delegate. In the book, we have 6 steps for effective delegation. Many people have told me that part of the book is worth the price of admission alone. It tells you how to transfer the responsibility, authority, how much feedback you want, what your involvement's going to be. Many times we don't effectively delegate because we get nervous and we don't know how to tell people what we expect of them. And they don't know how to ask us what you really want, and so it's like a confused mess. This will help you. The other part is, with the next 2 generations coming into the workforce, you really have to be collaborative in your management style. Anybody know her?
Okay.
Martha Stewart. In the 1990s, she was at the zenith of her career. She was the de facto authority for home decorating, for entertainment. Her company, Martha Stewart Omni Living, went public. She became a billionaire in 1996 based on her ownership in stock. Over time, word started to get out that she wasn't a great manager. That in the words of the executives who worked for her, she was a triangulator, pitting Mark against Tom to keep you both off, so I, as Martha, can keep control. You know those kind of bosses who pit people against each other? Power hungry. Eventually, this type of culture did impact her company. And in 2015, after a new CEO was brought in who led a turnaround, they sold her company for $353 million. 2 more, retain control. This is really important. When you roll out a strategic decision, you want to make sure that you're open to hearing from your people what's actually going on. Be proactive. Look for ideas of maybe unintended consequences. If you can run a simulation, run a simulation. If you can do a trial in part of the business to test this new strategy, do a trial. Don't roll it out completely. But don't not do something because you don't know how to implement it. Kodak, right?
Wow.
Was one of the most valuable brands in the world. With 95% of the film market, 95% of the domestic film market in the 90s, and 85% of the camera market.
Fortune 100.
Yeah. Made Rochester what it is, what it was. This is Steve Sassy, good-looking young man. He brought to his executives and to his managers a new invention because he was in the research and development area. You know what it was?
Digital?
A rudimentary digital camera. And instead of embracing him and his technology, they shunned both. One of the executives told Steve, you ready for this? Steve, no one will ever want to look at their pictures on their television set. Can you imagine? That was in the 1970s. They commissioned a report in the 1980s that basically told us, you know what? Digital has a chance to disintermediate our cash cow business. They were unable to figure out how to productize it. They kept the investments going. They had and held patents on technology, decided instead to license it. They gave the companies who eventually caused them to go into bankruptcy in 2012 the enabling technology in large part to do it.
Wow.
Today, the leaders of Kodak are trying to figure out how to take what was once a proud company and reinvigorate it. If you've ever seen stories about Rochester and what's happened to that city, it's amazing the damage that they've done. based on their inability to understand trends. The final one last one, ensure you stay outcome focused. When you roll out a strategy, many times you can get caught up in the weeds. Hey, look, big data is everywhere. You don't have to be a Fortune 100 CEO to be overwhelmed by information. You got to figure out what's the information you need versus what you don't need, and keep people focused on the desired outcome. Don't bury in a strategic decision things that are going to fix your business model but disadvantage your customers. Because you know what? They're going to figure that out. In 2004, Keurig, which up to that point had transformed their parent company, Green Mountain, from a regional roaster into a $4 billion monster, were coming out with their next generation of coffee makers. Brian Kelly, who was the CEO, said this is the most important product launch in our company's history. The marketing department said, this is the future of brewing, because not only could they make single cups, we could now brew carafes. The issue was, they were also seeing that the sales of their pods, which were high margin, were going down because competition was making pods. So in the 2.0, they put in a lockout feature that prevented third-party coffee pods from being used in the new brewer. Even their own My K-Cup, which allowed us to make our own custom blend and stick it in our Keurig, they told us this wouldn't work in it anymore. The Amazon reviews written by caffeine-deprived fury, people who bought this thing, the average Amazon review was a 1 star. A 1 star. People called the company greedy. For the first time in their history, after they started making these brewers, the quarter after they shipped 2.0, their revenue went down by 20%. Eventually, they had to remove that lockout feature, which was designed to make us buy their coffee pods and allow third-party coffee pods to exist. But they opened up a market opportunity for other people because they damaged their brand for a period of time. Steve Jobs said there are downsides to everything, there are unintended consequences to everything. Can I leave you with one last story and then we're done? This comes from the 1980s, and this is in the Philippines. Pepsi was freaking out because normally they fight like 40-40, you know, they're pretty close market share, they're fighting for a point or two here or there. In the Philippines at that time, Coke had 70% market share, Pepsi had 17%. And so they came to their marketing department and said, we need a program that turns this around, ladies and gentlemen. This is not good. And so they came up with an idea, and they called it the number fever. Simple. It married people's desire for instant wealth with the locals' gambling, love of gambling. It's a really easy program. You ever remember these?
Yeah.
The inside of bottle caps was a 3-digit number and then associated prize. There would be one grand prize awarded at the end of the program. And you would get 1 million pesos, which at the time was about $25,000. So they started this program. People loved it. Pepsi products were flying off the shelves. Their revenues were going up. Their anticipated market share gains were through the roof. It was so popular that they extended the program twice. Finally, ran out of money. Got to stop it. So they announced, Number fever will be coming to an end. Tomorrow we will draw the one grand prize number. If you happen to have that bottle cap and you live near Manila and our corporate headquarters, please come down because we want to give you your 1 million pesos in person. It's a big marketing opportunity, right? So they pulled out the number and it was 349. And over the next several days, literally thousands of people showed up at the headquarters claiming their prize. The unintended consequence of this great marketing strategy was they were to sequester a set of numbers that had the 3 digits and the million. They would only print one of those each, and then ultimately when the thing was over, they would pull one of those sequestered numbers, and that would be the number. It has been estimated that the printer who didn't get that memo printed up to 800,000. Let me say it again, printed up to 800,000 bottle caps with 349 and a million.
Wow.
The people in the country were not happy. 40 bottling trucks were burned to the ground. Molotov cocktails were thrown at the bottling plants. The Pepsi executives and their families had to leave the Philippines fearing for their safety. There were 1,000 lawsuits, civil and criminal, filed against Pepsi. It took 15 years to go through the legal system until the Supreme Court said, yeah, there was no criminal intent here. But it cost Pepsi tens of millions of dollars to satisfy the claims of the lawsuits. Now, I don't believe that any strategic decisions that you're going to make will end up with this kind of carnage. But just recognize the downstream impact of your major strategic decisions. I'd like to thank Gene and Mark for the opportunity to present a summary of my book, Killing Cats Leads to Rats. We have a drawing for 5 of them,
Yes.
and I can't wait. If you want me to, I'd be happy to inscribe them at the end of the meeting. I hope you found this conversation valuable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're going to have questions, if you don't mind, before the drawing. But while we're having Q&A, please pass up your interest cards so that maybe up Julie can collect. That would be awesome. Pass them up to the front of the table. We'll collect. All right, awesome. That was just fantastic. In fact, I have 12 questions of my own, but we're going to open it up to the front here, to the folks in front, and in the audience to see if there's questions. You can bring them. I can always prime the pump. Okay. I believe, Rick, that the title, I'm sure now I read this one and it's fantastic. I haven't read your other two, but I already have them and I'm going to read them. But I'm sure the other two were just as good, but I'll bet the title is really, really helpful. This was a great marketing move on your part.
Thank you.
Is it?
Well, and I'll tell you, I didn't create this title. I've been giving this talk for a number of years, and one of my clients was in the audience for one of the presentations, and I had it titled something else, but I had the example of the play, and he looked at me and he said, Rick, you should call this Troy Hoffman. Does anybody know Troy Hoffman? He said, Rick, yeah. He said, you should call this Killing Cats Leads to Rats. And I said, Troy, you're absolutely right. I should call this Killing Cats Leads to Rats. That's a better marketing message than what I had.
Yeah, great idea. Not only are the ideas very impactful, but the title, I think, is going to go into the annals of who moved my cheese and what made me.
Thank you.
So I think that's great. So, which leads me to my next question, and that is it self-published? Did you get a publisher? How did that work?
My first 2 books I independently published. So if you publish your own book, you independently publish the book. And you didn't self-publish, you independently published.
Independently.
Stood up for yourself, which is awesome because you make more money that way. But this book, I was able to sign a 2-book deal for this one and the next book I'm going to write. So this is through Motivational Press. They're a Southern California publisher of authors at my level.
Great. So leads me to the next question. So does this launch you onto a national stage? Is that what you want? Do you want to stay local with your business and your radio show? What are your plans and what's going to, and can you avoid being dragged onto a national stage with such a well-published, well-titled, and impactful book?
Thank you. So I've gone to Canada to give this talk. I've gone to the East Coast. I have a number of scheduled talks on this. I'm going to San Francisco to give this in Silicon Valley next Wednesday. I have a 10-year plan, ladies and gentlemen, where my wife's going to work for another 9 years, and over those 9 to 10 years, I want to move my platform to more keynote speaking and workshops. I want to keep the peer groups that I lead, and I have 4 of them here in Orange County, but over time I want to bring people in to help me to deliver the in-room experience and do more of this, because traveling sucks. Does anybody have to travel anymore? It's no fun. But if I was traveling with my wife because she was retired, that would be like a vacation.
Right.
So in 10 years, that's where I want to be, traveling to these different places, giving these talks with my wife so we can mix it with some fun. But right now, it's just a business.
Okay, interesting. So, and do you think you'll go to the Philippines?
I think I should.
Yes.
Sponsored by Pepsi?
Yeah.
Sponsored by
Thank you.
Okay, now I'm dominated. Come on, guys. Questions. Questions for Rick. Gene.
So Rick, in the story about Coke, and in the first recommendation is to slow down the decision-making process. But in every business book I've read, it's all about speeding up the process, because the sooner you make the decision, the sooner things start happening, and it's easier to say no and stop it than it is to just not make a decision.
Right.
So how does that work?
Thank you. This is the most common question that I get of the prescription, because it runs counter to culture today, especially if you're anywhere near technology with a minimum viable product and get it to market. And I believe you can only learn some things by doing them as well. the point we want to make in this is avoid making emotional decisions. Daniel Conaghan wrote a book on thinking fast and slow, and his research shows that for certain decisions you should use your gut and make decisions, but for strategic decisions you should not use that fast part of your brain because it is mostly triggered off of emotion. Many executives think their gut, I'm just going to make this decision, especially small companies because we think we have to be there first. What we're saying is don't make it as soon as possible, and certainly make a decision, because you'll read in my book, it says the worst thing you can do is ready, aim, and never fire. Because people get pissed off. Your employees go, you're ever going to decide? So they end up doing things that are counter just to get stuff done, and there's unintended consequences. Great question. You need to make them as fast as possible, but you need to push yourself from the emotion of the moment and make sure. That's why I like working with Angela, because he makes decisions based on research and facts. Have enough information to know that you're making a decision based on the facts, not on your instincts.
So follow-up to that question, I was thinking of the Samsung Note,
Yes.
and somebody knew,
Right.
but they were not brave enough to stand up and say stop, or they did, but they were overruled. But imagine that, you're in this huge company, and there's this big launch coming, and there's a lot of pressure to get ahead of Apple, right?
Right.
And you're the one guy, and maybe you're at a middle manager level, that goes up to the executive who's making this decision and say the batteries haven't been fully tested. The whole system hasn't been fully tested. With the batteries we have, we should not do this.
Yes.
And the guy tells him, I didn't hear you say that. Go back to your cubicle. That must have been a tough decision for that whoever it was that knew what was going on and reported it.
Well, if the first units shipped hot, you know the test units were hot. I mean, come on, really? They didn't have a sense of this? But to your point, the momentum was already, no, we got the ballroom in New York, baby.
Yeah.
We've already told the media to be there. Figure it out, engineers. Let's get the product out in the market. $5 billion later, oops.
Other questions? I'll keep going.
Joe?
Oh, Joe?
In your experience, Rick, how much of this can be found? There are situations where people just naturally have it happen, and obviously hindsight's 20/20 to see what somebody could have been done. Is there a set of rules or a set of don't do it again, history? Where do people find don't do this kind of thing for yourself?
Okay.
You know what I mean? You've got content here and examples of it, but
Thank you.
obviously there's 20 others just like everyone you found.
Yes, thank you. You opened the doors to something I always want to mention that I forgot. I'm crowdsourcing unintended consequences. Since I published the book, it is interesting how many people send me links to stories. All of my stories are big companies. Why? Because I can research them and not get sued. Right? There's information, there's footnotes in this thing because I gotta be careful. I'm calling Mark Stewart a power-hungry triangulator. I don't want her on my back. But hey, here's the article, right? I'm looking for small company examples so that when I present to a mixed audience, I can bring it home. So if you ever see or hear or live an unintended consequence, and you're brave enough to tell me about it, I would love to learn those stories. Brainstorming is a key way. We didn't talk about it today. Ask yourself the question. I'm amazed how many members of my critical mass community, the CEO peer groups that I lead, now that we've been talking about this for a month or two, say, well, what's the unintended consequence of that? Think about what could go wrong or right. What are the unintended? Empower your people to think that way. To your point, let people tell you the truth. If you just ask the question, well, what could this do? Let's think out of the box, ladies and gentlemen. Let's brainstorm a minute. What's crazy? You might find somebody pick up an idea that you go, oh, we should probably look at that a little bit before we Thanks, Joe.
I love the subject. Thank you very much. The whole concept of unintended consequence, and I think you just hit the key, which is asking the question, what is the unintended consequence of this? And if you're leading a group, make sure that everybody's looking at that. But I'm also curious, the ramifications of politics and how much you thought of that, because it's so prevalent in the short-term thinking and not considering the unintended consequences of the law to do well. You touched on it a little bit with the DC thing. But
Right, so I'm not going to get political, but I'll give you a case study, a real-world example of a story that came to us since I published a book in one of our peer groups. Remember the expand your knowledge, the E and the first E in secure, expand your knowledge? Kind of know what it is you're deciding. One of our members went to Sacramento to lobby some state legislators against a pending bill that would force condo associations to do destructive testing for their balconies. Because the truth is, it's overkill. And most homeowner associations do not have the money in their reserves to do the level of testing that the state's going to require. It could bankrupt community associations, frankly, if it's implemented. And she came back and she said, I was amazed at how little these legislators knew about the bill they were about to vote on. Expand your knowledge. They never, how about we gotta pass the bill to read it.
Yeah.
Read it. How do you even guess what the unintended consequences of that decision will be? You're just moving forward. So a lot of unintended consequences have been about government policy, government regulation, and I get that because that's a big societal thing. But what are companies but small societies by way of review? The same dynamics happen in companies. You need to try to control them in your own business.
You know, I had, in the time period you're talking about, I worked for PepsiCo, both Pepsi and Frito-Lay. So I was living through this in the 80s and 90s and saw a lot of that. Saw the classic Coke, the old Coke, the classic Coke. But one of the things working with small businesses, I tell them all the time, having lived through some of those things that took forever, years to make decisions. And one of the best things about small business is they're nimble. They can sit around a table, they can talk about it, they can make decisions, and Monday they can implement them. One of the worst things in the world about small business is they're nimble. They can sit around a table, they can make a decision, and Monday they can implement it. So your point about slowing down and making sure you understand and get feedback from employees, look at what other people at your size in the market have done before you pull the trigger and understand as best you can without getting lethargic. But keeping nimble but not being nimble crazy is huge. It's really huge. So.
Well, also, it's not a perfect process, right? You're never going to spend just the right amount of time or...
What is that?
Yeah, what is that? So it's an ongoing process, right? So this idea of slowing it down and getting all your input right makes a lot of sense, but Starbucks is heading right back into it with their latest issue.
Yeah.
So it's just a continuous process, and I like all the tips. Thank you.
I saw Mark Zuckerberg on Mad. He was being interviewed early on when all this Cambridge Analytica hit, and he knew he had to go to DC, and now he's over in Europe. He's on this tour, this apology tour, they're calling it. I'm saying sorry. But what he said to the interviewer in this first interview that I saw is, when I started Facebook, if you would have told me that I had to worry about Facebook's impact on the presidential election, I would have thought you were crazy. Never thought of that. And I thought, okay, as an entrepreneur in your bedroom, I get that. But when you hit 1 billion users, didn't somebody in your board go, holy shit, how can somebody use this information for evil? Or, what, you're a global company with almost 2 billion users now. Really? You never thought, that's not true, Mark. What you said was, our business model is built on this. We don't want to screw up the business model, so let's just hope that doesn't ever happen. And the perfect storm happened because it's tied to this political thing that is constantly in the news. I mean, talk about an unintended consequence. If it wouldn't have been tied, I think, to what happened, we were living gladly accepting privacy laws. Go take it, yeah. Tell everybody I'm at Starbucks.
So true.
Several months ago, I admitted indirectly how old I really am by talking about green bar paper that used to come out of mainframe computers. So just to assure that I actually am that old, I remember when I was in IT and we were handing out 300 baud external modems.
You bet.
And then it was a red letter day when they became 1200 baud.
Wow.
And it was haze. Remember that?
When you put the handset in order to send an email?
Remember those? And they
The
were
coupling?
built in. They were built in. I also remember IBM, Watson, had the Think sign put everywhere throughout the Founder. Think. It was hanging on the walls, and it was actually a good technique. It was stop and think. Think about what you're doing. Think about the strategy and all that stuff. I don't know if you guys remember, but Apple, Steve Jobs, came up with his own slogan, and that was think different. And I don't know, when you see that, I'm not sure that people realize that it was an extension of the IBM Think. It was think different. So that was good. Now, speaking of think different, Kodak. There was a glimmer of hope for a while. After the horse left the barn and they said, hey, digital cameras are here to stay, what can we do? I remember they had a campaign to try to pull women in to use Kodak products of some sort. I think it had to do with printing or storing or something like that. The reason was that everybody was using digital cameras, but at the time, you had to connect it to your PC and then transfer the pictures somehow, right? And that was the domain of the husband. Okay, so the wife still took all the pictures. They handed the camera to the husband, to Joe, who then said, yeah, I'll take care of it. And it stayed on the camera or on the chip, or it went to the computer. It was always there, but it never went to where generally the person in the family, and this is very sexist, but that's just the way it was. It was the women that took care of the printing of the making of the copies and picking the best ones and sending them out to all the family members. Kodak finally realized that all the pictures were sitting in a hard drive and nobody's distributing anymore, and they tried to get a handle on that, but I think it was too late for them.
Earlier this year, I was in Toronto giving this talk, and the night before I did, I've got Google alerts, and Kodak came up because they're in my talk, and I try to stay aware. And what had happened was the stock price of Kodak had popped. Why did it pop? Because they still have this big infrastructure in Rochester that's basically not doing anything, but it has a ton of power. And so they were announcing that they were going to try to figure out how their invested infrastructure would be used to create these Bitcoin generators, because they take a lot of power. And so I thought, well, there might be an opportunity for Kodak to resurrect itself on new technology using their installed infrastructure.
Right. The Tata Nano reminded me of the Chevy Nova, which they try to sell in the Spanish-speaking markets as the Chevy Nova. But in Spanish, Nova means it doesn't go. So that was, and they had to change the name. And then, Walmart. So Walmart, with the unintended consequence of raising the wage, and they had to go to the next layer up, completely understand. But what's happening in the movement to raise the minimum wage that's being legislated, that part is being kind of forced on the companies, because nobody's saying and legislate the next level up. It's just kind of happens. So there's an unintended consequence of that legislation is what I was thinking of.
There's a hand in the back, Mark.
Yes.
Mark, that raises the point we're seeing now